Both Seb and I are suffering a bit because I did a fitness session with my sister-in-law's fitness person and I literally can't move. He did a fitness session with Daley Thompson.
I've got even less excuses.
And really he shouldn't be suffering because he is an athlete. And I kind of think you were once an athlete, always an athlete, yes?
It was all right. It was okay for about a week until it sort of then the world started
I'm
closing.
2 days after and I'm really sore. When you do that on a regular basis and you are going through a pain barrier, a mental pain barrier, and you're learning resilience, you're learning stamina, do you think that has been a constant as well? And does it help your brain to be physically fit?
I think it does. I think there's no question about that. It was interesting, the Americans have known there's a very good educational unit at Northwestern, Evanston, just outside Chicago, where they've done a lot of work on performance in the classroom setting with kids. And they know that particularly boys, you take boys for 20 minutes every hour into an environment of physicality, the rest of the 40 minutes is 100 times more productive. And actually, it's a silly thing, when I've got a speech to make, I will always stick it on the treadmill, have it in front of me, and it just goes in much quicker, and you memorize things much. I certainly do. And so I'm absolutely convinced about that. But I think the other thing it does is that I recognize I'm slightly privileged to be able to say this, but if you've sat in a call room 40 minutes before an Olympic final, where you're in a space probably not much bigger than the platform we're sitting in, and there are 7 or 8 other people all looking at each other wondering whether, at the end of 10, 15 years of slog that, they've got the national lottery ticket in their pocket, then there's not much in life that's going to faze you when you go into other high-pressured environments. There's nothing I've ever experienced that gets within the foothills of that half an hour before an Olympic final, when you're all sort of sitting, caged, waiting to be introduced.
Steve Ovette's staring at you.
Yeah,
or not.
Or not, as the case may be. But no, I think you do tend to understand how to cope with pressure in an environment, and frankly, I've never found anything more pressurizing than that half hour.
And for those of us that won't be in that situation,
I realise that.
No.
But
I'm just trying to think. No, it's fine because it's true. It's your life. But is that an image then when you are in a situation where you might get nervous or you are under pressure or you're going to have to do something that just makes you feel a bit edgy? Do you visualise that again and go, well, it's not? So should we all take the thing that actually was the scariest in our lives, whether it was taking exams or waiting for results or going into a job interview, and visualise that and go, well, it's not as bad as that?
I think you can, and you probably should. For me, that used to come in a number of different ways. My coaches always encouraged me, and it was the right thing to do, is before a race, just spend a little bit of time on your own thinking about what it's taken to get to where you are. And sometimes it's a more complicated one because, I think mental strength comes, in sport, I think mental strength comes primarily from supreme physicality. So there are races that I've won where I know that I've been less than physically at my best, but I've just thought my way through it. But that's a relative rarity. The times that I've been mentally at my best in a race is because I haven't had to remotely think about the fact that I've had an interrupted build-up training-wise, or other things in my life have not gone as well as they should have done, and I've not been able to focus the amount of work or training. When you go into the environment knowing that there is absolutely no stone left unturned, that as one of my coaches used to say, the hay's in the barn, there's nothing more that you can do, then that's the time often to sit back and just reflect on all the things that you've done to get to that moment. And, it's the same in any business. And I guess it's in a business analogy, isn't it? Particularly if you're pitching, you don't ever want to be thrown anything in a competition that you haven't dealt with 1,000 times on the training track. It is just often just physically being there and recognizing, and this is the tough one given the climate, the cultural climate that we live in, when you're saying to a kid at the age of 10 or 12, let me metaphorically, literally take you by the hand, take you to the running track, you probably are not going to see any massive development for at least 6 or 7 years. I joined an athletics club at the age of 11. I didn't make it into an Olympic stadium until my 22nd, 23rd year. So it's a 12-year apprenticeship in essence. And it's now very counter-narrative because, all right, I'm slightly going to go off one now. But, if you can be on the front page of a tabloid newspaper for having sat in the cardboard cutout of a house on the edge of Hemel Hempstead for 6 weeks on Channel 4, and for another 6 weeks you have instant fame. It's quite a tough thing when you've got that waterfall flowing in one direction, and people like us are trying to encourage more young people into sport to take it seriously, or create a business where you're not probably going to see very much other than hard slog and real graft for the first 15 years. So I think the real challenge now is to get people to think long term. And politics, of course, is the worst because nobody thinks beyond an election.
I follow quite a lot of athletes on social media, and I find it fascinating those that can translate what they do into our lives. And Jo Rowsell-Shand was part of the very successful pursuit team that won Olympic gold medals, cycling. And she put up a message the other day that I just found intriguing. She said when she was an athlete, the question she would get asked most of all was, how do you stay motivated? And she said, actually, you have to admit, you can't be motivated every single day. Not every day you're going to jump out of bed thinking, I'm going to win an Olympic gold medal today. She said, but what I was and what I learnt to be was committed. And she said, motivation and commitment go together. And commitment is doing it because you've got to, but also because you believe in your team and you don't want to let your team down. And I think this is where sport has that much broader remit and should and could be taught in schools through various different subjects. But it's something that I do think as well, you seem to be motivated, but I wonder if actually what the key is commitment, and motivation is going to happen every once in a while.
I think that's true. I agree. I don't think you can stay at that level. I bounced back in 1984 and successfully defended my Olympic title off probably one of the lowest bases of training that I'd had for a long time, because I'd lost pretty much the whole of 1983. I got back into training in early 1984. I joined Haringey Athletic Club that year. I was basically running around jogging with 14-year-old kids, in February, March. It looked a very tall order. But looking back, I just wonder whether that time out actually just refreshed mentally and physically.
And do you do that now? Do you give yourself time out?
Yes, I do. Yes, you have to. You absolutely have to. And if you can't do that, do other things. It's personal for me, but you just have to say, I cannot read another document on corporate governance or on DSD or on, doping policies or on, reforming the one-day format. You just have to go and read a novel or just go and do something entirely different. And, walking and exercise is an important part of that. So, look, sadly, most of us are not able just to sort of say, right, I've had enough of this, I'm going to do something else for 6 months. You're on a bit of a treadmill. But I think there are things that you can do just to vary the mental...
And that can
Dennis
have a
Healy
big
called
impact
it
in
the
the short...
hinterland, and he's right. The best politicians always had a hinterland. They always knew that there was something beyond, the ballot box or the chamber, and they always knew I think you have to know there's an escape route. You have to know there are other things that you can do and you would do if you wanted to.